South Carolina.
I know. I don't get it. Well, yesterday in the first day of filing in Missouri, some interesting developments. Dean Plocker, right, he filed.
He did
for
file.
lieutenant governor, which I think wasn't unexpected, but a surprise to me.
Oh,
Another filing was Kurt Schaefer.
Yeah, definitely a surprise is Kurt Schaefer, who's going to join us later this morning.
Yes, that'll be great.
At 8:10. Known to many in the area, he is an attorney, was previously elected, previously ran for Attorney General, and threw his name in the ring for Congressional District 3. And so that is the big news out from yesterday, at least for mid-Missouri.
In other electoral guest notes, Will Scharf, who's running for Attorney General, will join us at 7:35, so you won't want to miss that as well. So it's a busy day here on Wake Up Mid-Missouri, and we hope you will weigh in on your thoughts on things going on around the world. Oh, I can't wait for the Hunter Biden filibuster that's going to happen on Capitol Hill today. Behind closed doors, transcripts will be released, but they're going to go probably all day. Yes,
I think so. And, this is round 2 because they tried this once before and he showed up and he just grandstanded on the steps and never went into that closed door meeting. So we'll see what happens.
And the Fannie Willis, Nathan Wade, and now Nathan Wade's law partner, this is turning into, it's becoming one of these soap opera televised trials. I mean, there was the OJ trial. There was who the actor? I don't follow the actors. Not Johnny Depp. Who was it?
Yeah, that was Johnny Depp.
Johnny Depp. I mean, and now we got Nathan Wade's law partner getting himself all mixed up and then probably perjuring himself. There was a big attorney-client privilege dispute there. Did he meet, or someone's attorneys met with the judge in that case? Can you explain, Stephanie, what was going on there?
I think so.
Yeah.
But so I think he had claimed attorney-client privilege, and then upon further questioning, there was a question of whether he could actually claim that privilege. But because the privilege is very important, and you wouldn't want to break it, if it actually exists, I think what the judge did was said, hey, we're going to do some questioning in camera first and try to, suss this whole thing out. What
I saw yesterday, the little bit of testimony, I have a little sound on it we'll play later, but I saw that Terrence Bradley, the guy, Nathan Wade's ex-business law partner, they were referencing in the questioning texts between him and Ashley Merchant, who's an attorney for the defense for one of the indicted, right? One of the Trump code indictees. Okay.
Yeah, Michael Roman's attorney, Ashley, I think.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah. So is that why you don't have to worry? If you tell something, you and I are on opposite sides, right? I'm suing you or you're suing me, and your attorney contacts my attorney and they're texting back and forth. Is that protected? I thought the only protected was that's what they were referencing.
Okay.
Yeah. So I think that's where they got in trouble, because he was essentially, I think, very not circumstantially, almost directly saying that, I told him to date her. Don't do whatever. I don't know. It was crazy. I don't know.
It was some weird testimony.
Didn't you? Yeah, John, didn't you find it interesting? I mean, and he was struggling mightily to try to make any coherence out of his past testimony, what was on the text and what he was saying, at the time during his testimony yesterday. It was crazy. I mean, that is a circus down there.
Well, and then, we were doing the Radiothon Thursday, Friday, so we didn't really get to the triangulation of the towers and how that appears to show that the relationship started much earlier.
Thousands of texts, thousands of phone calls.
And insane. How can you spend that much time on the phone?
I don't know.
I don't talk to anybody that much. It's been, I mean, talk about, made for TV. It has been a wild ride, and it's not over.
I know. Well, it's crazy. Brian Hauswirth joins us now. Brian, you had some interesting interviews yesterday, right?
I did. I needed a clone. And I know our listeners don't support human cloning. I'm not suggesting that, but I definitely not. I know
it's Jurassic Park here on Wake Up Mid-Missouri.
Exactly.
Dolly the sheep.
Yeah, exactly. But I just there were so many people that were yesterday, and I was at the Capitol yesterday. I did not go over to the Kirkpatrick building, but my two biggest interviews were Congressman Sam Graves and Congressman Jason Smith. I don't know that our listeners really understand the magnitude of having a Missourian chair Ways and Means and chair transportation.
It's a huge deal.
Never happened in my lifetime. It will probably never happen again. It's huge, but both of them filed for re-election and both met with the governor. I'll talk more about the Jason Smith tomorrow, but focusing on Sam Graves today. He met with the governor. I thought a couple of other highlights from yesterday. December Harmon, she is a name that people, I know Brandon used to talk about her when he was here on the show. December Harmon's an activist, was involved in the Columbia Citizens Police Review Board. She has filed for the U.S. Senate to try to unseat Josh Hawley. And this is an interesting race to me. I mean, she's well known here in Columbia, but not so much around the rest of the state. Carla May, of course, filing for the U.S. Senate, and Lucas Coutts. Josh Hawley was not there yesterday. I thought the other two things that really grabbed my attention were in the 3rd District. Mark Alford referred to Taylor Burks yesterday. Burks did not file, but of course he's still got a month to do it. Kurt Schaefer we heard his name, but he did file yesterday, and then some other people did as well. Arnie Dienoff, Kyle Bone, Bob Onder, Mary Elizabeth Coleman, just to name a few, were some of the others who did file. And I did see briefly, I saw Lincoln Huff yesterday. I didn't get to talk to him. He nodded at me, but he walked by, and he was on his way to file, I later learned. But I was interviewing Sam Graves when he came by, and he filed for lieutenant governor. So that is going to be interesting. And just, Randy, we're going to have to correct some things on Twitter very quickly.
Uh-oh.
If you look at the governor's feed, and for the progressives out there, I've reported this multiple times. They keep saying when he was talking about his meeting with Graves, thank Biden for the money. Folks, I've reported it over and over again. That money is state dollars. The only federal money that's in there, of course, we have to repeat it because you have to repeat this over and over again. The only federal money in there at all is the $90 million that came in. And that came in at the very end. It's going to help out, really help I-44 more than anything else. But I just, people are saying on there that, Graves, didn't do it. It was all federal money. And again, it's primarily almost all state dollars, the $2.8 billion. And who is this Laura Burkhart? Who is that? She's on Twitter all the time.
I think Laura Burkhart, if I'm not mistaken, that is a woman who grew up with my kids just down the street in suburban St. Louis. I think, is that a different Laura Burkhart?
I have no idea, but
there's a Laura Burkhart that owns a hamburger stand down in South City, but she's very active on the Twitter feed.
Yeah, and I don't know which one it is, but regardless, she is saying, Graves, you voted against all these things about the $90 million or whatever, and obviously she has strong opinions about him, but that $90 million, as I've reported, Graves didn't vote for or against it. That was a federal grant that came from the Department of Transportation with Pete Buttigieg. So very important to note that. But just a lot of comments, surprisingly, about the governor's meeting with Sam Graves, and it all ended up being about President Biden. But hopefully people will know that primarily is a state project, and we'll see what happens. But Graves did file, and he told me he's not going to take any race for granted. He's going to run this, and there are a couple of Democrats who are challenging him, and a couple of Republicans who are challenging him too.
Boy, he's going to be hard to beat, though. I mean, he's got a large jurisdiction. He's done a lot for rural Missouri in times of trouble. As rural Missouri, a lot of the cities are shrinking. A lot of, there's just a lot that he's been fighting for to try to, restore the rural Missouri that they knew. I mean, because of, I think, a consolidation in the ag industry and other reasons, it's a different rural Missouri now than it was just 10, 15 years ago.
And when I worked in radio in Carrollton in 1993 and 1994, there were 3 Democratic congressmen from North Missouri.
Yeah.
There's now
government spending or whether we will have a shutdown on Friday. Now, we have I think we've kicked the can 3 times.
Yeah.
And we are maybe about to do that again. Of course, there was a big meeting in D.C. yesterday among congressional leaders. Speaker Johnson met with Biden, Kamala, Hakeem Jeffries, everybody. And there's really no consensus coming out of that meeting from what has been reported. But I don't think there's going to be a government shutdown. It's just everyone's in campaign season, political season. Biden's got the State of the Union next week. So, if we hold it up and we help shut the government down, it's a mess for everybody. And ultimately, I think, there's not a lot of bipartisan issues, but somehow they always kind of come together right at the last minute.
Well, close of business Friday is 60 hours from now. That's not a lot of time. I mean,
and that's what we've said 3 times now, and they've always come, done something.
Aren't you glad to see Mike Johnson holding the line? I think that's fantastic. I mean, I think this guy, his demeanor, his solid, staid way of stating these things, that it's just like, well, this is obvious. I mean, why are we even talking about this? I like that.
Well, and I think elections have consequences, right? And we wouldn't be in this situation if we would have gotten our red wave. And, I'm nervous already for the next cycle. But, certainly we would have a lot more leverage on some of these issues if we had more Republicans in Congress. All right. Also happening today, of course, Hunter Biden is expected to show up in a closed-door meeting that is expected to go all day. This is the second go-round for him. He had originally showed up and done kind of like a media stump on the stairs of the Capitol, I think is where he actually did that. But anyway, he is actually expected to attend this meeting and answer questions. Whether anything will come of that, we will see. At the same time, we are expecting Biden to issue a new executive order today.
Another?
He issues a whole bunch. But on this one, a lot of times he issues some executive order, it gets challenged in court and it goes by the wayside. He tried to do the student loan stuff through executive order. This one, I don't know that anyone will challenge it. He's going to try to restrict the sale of sensitive data to China and Russia and other countries. And I think for the most part, like, Republicans don't want this, data to go to China. Now, how he goes about doing that, we'll see.
Are they really trying to buy it? I thought they just hack in and own it anyway. I mean, what's why they don't need to buy it?
Yeah, all on TikTok.
We're all connected.
So we'll see, what comes down in that executive order and how he plans to go about that. Of course, we've got Michigan primary. God, there's so many things going on. With the Michigan primary yesterday, of course, a lot of folks voted uncommitted. Not a good look for Biden. Also, Nikki Haley is still losing
and still fighting for inapparent reasons. I guess wanting to be on the batters up circle. I don't know.
I mean, and it's really interesting, and I actually saw some support from folks for RFK from Missourians yesterday, and I thought that's really interesting. But there are some updates there. In order to be on the ballot as an independent, you do have to gather some signatures, and RFK is saying that they have gathered enough signatures to get his name on the ballots in states like Arizona and Georgia. And so, how a third party might affect that race,
I have a feeling RFK is going to be this. He may play the deal maker or deal breaker in this election. I think
spoiler.
It may happen.
He's the spoiler.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I think that I don't think he's going to win. But you sent me a video the other day that he was appealing to young voters. It was a very appealing, very moderate message. I mean, I found it appealing as a voter myself.
Right. So we haven't had a serious third party candidate in a long time. And I'm seeing more, and people love to Super Bowl ad. So how that affects the race, I don't know. And I know we talked a little bit about independent candidates yesterday. Maybe it was off air because the Democrats wouldn't let Sarah Unsicker run as a Democrat. And so I'm not exactly sure what she did, but I did look up all the rules on independent candidates, and you just have to go out. I think you need 10,000 signatures. You don't have to even turn them in until the summertime. So she could maybe appear as a third party candidate.
And Hannah loves RFK without his shirt off. I mean, didn't you say that, Hannah? Well, Hannah looked at me. Hannah just gave me the stink eye there. I guess.
Welcome to the gun show.
John, I must have the wrong woman in my life that tells me that she loves well, maybe that's my wife. about muckraking in the finest tradition of muckraking. And you've now caught some Arab American influence in major American universities.
Yeah, we, for almost 5 years now, we've been fighting along with and on behalf of another nonprofit organization, the Zacor Legal Institute, trying to figure out where the money from Qatar is going to our public universities, or I guess to our colleges and universities around the country, both public and private.
And you recently had a piece, I think, in the Daily Caller, kind of suggesting, hey, is this foreign cash? Is this why our youth are protesting and are terrorists, basically supporting terrorists?
Yeah, I mean, I'm shocked. I mean, I guess when I saw this Harvard poll back in November and December where, about half of Americans ages 18 to 24 support Hamas, which is a terrorist organization. Let's just say that. That's what the federal government says. That's what the State Department has said since 1997. Half of American youth are, in support of a terrorist organization. And the question is why? And so our piece in the Daily Caller kind of goes through this idea that $500 million being funneled from Qatar and its affiliates to universities may be responsible for part of that, because we've been fighting to learn what strings have been attached. Where's all this money going, and why is it going to our universities?
Well, and it's not just liberal universities. I mean, the one that you focus on in your article is Texas A&M.
Yeah, it's absolutely shocking. We were fighting for 5 years against essentially Texas A&M and the Texas Attorney General's office to find out where the money was coming from and where it was going. And we continued to fight that battle. But, Texas A&M recently announced that they were closing their Doha campus in Qatar. And, that's a step in the right direction. But that wasn't a $500 million campus. So the question is, where's the rest of that money going? Yeah. And what's it being used for in Texas?
It's interesting to try to connect the dots between what you're finding and the political sympathy for the pro-Gazan, pro-Palestinian, pro-Hamas, dare I say, movement among young people, and that includes that college bracket. Are there any definite smoking guns there as to how that money is translating into influencing their opinions?
We haven't found the smoking gun yet, and that's because they've been fighting like crazy. Both Qatar as well as Texas A&M have been fighting to keep the actual contracts private. Right? They're not just gifts to the university. Oh. They're strings attached to them. Mm-hmm. And we want to know what those are. What type of professors are being hired? Yeah. What are they being hired to teach? There are a lot of questions. It all started, and I hate to say innocently, with, this idea of BDS, of divesting from Israel. But, that seems so quaint these days when now we're talking about support for terrorist organizations.
That's a lot to digest. Now, you've also had an article recently about presidential sock drawers. And when we went to law school together, I don't know that, you would ever envision writing about presidential sock drawers. But I used to kind of introduce you to my friends. I'm like, this is the Hillary emails guy. Because
the Clinton sock drawer guy.
Yeah, for a long time, you did a lot of work in court trying to get, to Hillary's emails. And I know you were, did a lot of work there. But so you've been kind of following, transparency is one of Judicial Watch's big issues, but you've kind of been following these records issues, not just since, the government invaded Mar-a-Lago, but for a long, long time. So talk to us about presidential sock drawers.
Yeah, going back to almost right after we started graduating, after we graduated in 2010, transparency was one of my focus areas, and, kind of looking at what presidents can and can't do with their records when they leave office. And, I think it's clear from the special counsel report, most recently related to records that now President Biden, but was the vice president when he took the records, shows that every president does, whether it's Reagan, starting with Reagan all the way down the line until to the current president, every president has taken records with him when he's left office. And, the ranges are because he wants to write a book, or, what I think is more troubling, Vice President Biden took records about Afghanistan because he thought he was right and President Obama was wrong on the strategy, and he wanted the records to prove it, most likely because he wanted to run for president one day and thought those records would be helpful. And so the question that, I raise in this piece is, what's different about Trump? Why is he being prosecuted after his house was raided for records that every other president and, quite frankly, vice president has gotten a pass on?
A lot of people have that questions about a lot of the prosecutions of Donald Trump. Why is he so special? I think we all know. You're listening to Michael Bekesha, who joins us on Wake Up Mid-Missouri this morning.
Michael, I know you got beat up in the national press. I don't know if it was last year or so, but the whole angle of the Presidential Records Act and the semantics of agency records and presidential records.
Yeah, it's I think everybody wants an easy answer. Everybody wants to think, well, clearly what he took weren't presidential records. They were from the agency. But I also had a piece in the Wall Street Journal, I think it was over the summer, that said, look, he's not being accused of going into agencies and taking records that never came across his desk. What he has in his possession are records that he collected, he gathered, and designated and placed into a box while he was president. And last week, his attorneys down in Florida filed a whole host of motions, but he had two that I found very interesting. One was focused entirely on the Presidential Records Act, and it kind of followed along on what several of my opinion pieces have said, which is that the president has the authority to designate what's personal and what's presidential. And that's what he did in this case, and he can't be prosecuted for it. But the other one, and one that people almost were making fun of his attorneys for arguing, was on presidential immunity. And the argument there was, when he decided to take the records, he was president of the United States. And so he can't be prosecuted for a decision that was made while he was president. And I don't know why that is not a winner of an argument, because even the indictment says, this all started when President Trump took boxes with him while he was president. And to me, that seems to be the end of the story, that, there is no real fight about agency records or personal records or presidential records, or even what authority he may or may not have to classified information, because he was president of the United States. He was commander-in-chief. He gets to decide under the Constitution what are his records and what aren't, and that's what he did.
Yeah, that seems like a privilege of the presidency. But let's talk really broader implications, because I know, for example, so you do transparency work across a lot of different states. And here in Missouri, we've got, the Sunshine Law. And I think, the more people request records, the more people decide, you know what, I'm just not going to write this down. I'm going to pick up the phone and I'm going to make a phone call. I'm not going to do texting. I'm not going to put that in an email. We're going to have in-person meetings. So it changes people's behavior when there's litigation, or when there's, a dust up over open records, right? And so here, say Trump gets reelected and he knows now, that my records, they might search my house and anything I take home. Isn't there an incentive then for him to not take notes, not keep, How does this change his behavior going forward?
I think it absolutely does, and I think it has changed over the years. It has changed behavior. Why did Secretary Clinton? Why did Hillary Clinton have a private server? It's because she knew all her emails would be subject to FOIA, and she didn't want that because she was going to run for president one day. And so, I think right now, as you've seen, everybody is thinking about, how do I get around the law? Hillary Clinton seemed to do that unlawfully. your suggestion, Stephanie, that people have more in-person meetings, more phone calls, that's a lawful way to do it. And it may hurt transparency in the end, but, the good news is we still get to see what our elected officials' policy positions are. And if we don't like what they're doing, whether it's by email or in-person meetings, then we get to vote them out vote them out at the next election.
And in fairness, though, I think if you've been in a position of leadership, there are times when you throw stuff at the wall. And in these days of gotcha media, if all of that stuff, just ideas that are thrown at the wall, look at Trump's conversations about, well, what could we do? An alternate slate of electors? That's not an action. That's a thought. That's a question. And those are getting turned into, I think more than they really are in some cases. I think there's got to be a sweet spot there, and maybe bringing it back into a little bit of some sanity so that you can have a discussion about ideas through a personal conversation or a phone call, while still maintaining some transparency that's where you guys are doing the great work. That's good. I'm glad to see that. Hey, thanks for all you do for us. We appreciate all of that work. And again, we refer folks to Judicial Watch. Fantastic work you all are doing out there. Michael Bekesha, thanks so much.
Thank you. Have a great day.
All right, you too. It's great when they get these records and you just see what's going on with them. I didn't realize Cotter was flowing so much. ladies and gentlemen, and I just wanted to get your thoughts on it at 573-874-9390. Either call or text. But there's this accumulating information that has me bothered about where our donations go to conservative causes. Ronna McDaniel is stepping down from the RNC. And it's reported that, lavish expenditures, limousine rides, lavish parties, and I'm not sure how that advances the conservative cause. If I'm donating my hard-earned dollars, I go to the grocery store, I buy some milk, some fruit and vegetables, maybe pick up a little hamburger, and I got
some fondue supplies.
Oh, fondue. Oh, I don't buy fondue because it's expensive, except for to share with people who are traveling with me to Switzerland. Thanks to everyone who came out to the meeting last night. Scotty Cox and I had a great time meeting everyone there. At any rate, and you spend $40 or $50 and you have 2 little plastic bags. That used to buy at least 3 plastic bags worth. Well, then the story about the National Rifle Association, Wayne LaPierre, former executive director for a long, long time, got in trouble for lavish spending there. Renting yachts, and it just goes on and on and on. And you think, well, I gave to the NRA for years, and I stopped giving because I heard about this. I'm like, I don't need that. I'm looking at Gun Owners of America now. We have those people, I don't know, maybe we had, who was it? Jesus, someone from there the other day. Jose, someone. You know what I mean? So I'm just thinking, what does this, and we see that giving is down in the Republican Party, right? And you have to ask yourself, at what point are they are asking us to support them in behalf of responsible fiscal management, cut spending at the federal level. That would cut into, if it's done right, it's going to cut into Social Security benefits, either extending your working years and retiring later, or maybe you're going to have to pony up for your Medicare benefits, a little more out of pocket. That's the only way those are going to stay solvent, right? So agriculture, maybe farm subsidies for crop insurance, why are we being asked to tighten our belt, but we're not seeing a lot of that going on in the organizations that we sponsor? Is that all lobbying that goes on that way? Is it just Republican? Is it not Democrat? I don't know. It's a black box for me.
Well, remember back to 2020 and what they say, the Biden campaign raised like $1 billion.
Right. That was the first time, I think, that it topped $1 billion. Yeah.
Well, and Trump was about 3/4 of that.
Now,
so
I'd like to think
talking real money when you get to that.
If the Democrat, and you know what, if the Democrats said, we go to Walmart or Sam's or Hy-Vee, and we just buy a bouquet of flowers in the water there, and we have our glass vases from the meeting we had last year, and we put them in there, and someone throws some glass beads on the table, and that's our centerpiece. We don't hire someone for $100,000 for centerpiece at an RNC event.
But they don't. The Democrats spend money just like this.
How do we know? I don't know.
Because the reason why we know all these RNC expenses is because it's reported to the FEC. And so that's how they've totaled up all of these limo expenses and hotel expenses and whatever else. But I think, when you're asking someone, from the private world to come in and run one of these organizations, and Ronna took a lot of criticism from Harmeet Dillon when they faced off, and part of it was over expenses. So I do think, hey, let's take a look at the expenses, see if they're, but, I don't fault her for, people, if you're meeting with really fancy donors and you're asking for big checks, then your meeting better be at the Four Seasons.
Warren Buffett wouldn't ask for that.
Well, Warren Buffett is one of a kind.
I like Warren. I mean, we ought to have
the
more
meeting at McDonald's.
I want to have more Warrens around.
Well, yeah, but these are when you're at that level, these people are used to the Four Seasons. They're used to private car services. That's just that's what they're used to, and that's what you have. There are things you have to do in order to appease the people that you are working on behalf of. And in this instance, people saw the expenses and they're changing leadership. So ultimately, it's on us as citizens and donors to take a look at these expenses. And if we don't like it, get rid of the people at the top, which, is
right. That's
kind
what
of
happened.
What's happening. Yeah.
And then the candidates create a leadership pack and to back other candidates and somebody else's political agenda, and it ends up being a slush fund.
I mean, but think about it on the private, like on just like local nonprofits, right? They ask us to donate money, and what do? They put on a really fancy party, and we get really excited. They don't have their fancy parties, at Walmart.
Is that in defense of expensive consultants and high-priced limousines? I think so. I think we're in a break. All right.
I concur.
Broadcasting live from the Zimmer Communications World Headquarters. This is Wake Up Mid-Missouri.
Get ready, pal.
Here's your host, Randy Tobler.
Welcome back to Wake Up Mid-Missouri. Will Scharf's going to join us in the next segment. Actually, it's 7:35. You won't want to miss that because the next segment will be Hannah. That we don't want to miss What's Hot with Hannah because I brought in some chocolate for her this morning. She's pumped. She's fired up. We're going to be on time. Now, you may have wondered what happened at the end of the last segment. We thought we'd do a little inside radio. Once in a while, and you can...
I fall asleep at the board.
No, it wasn't that. You can tell when we get into a discussion where there may be a little difference of opinion, it gets interesting. And see, those are the conversations that then we forget time. We lose time. That happens
behind the curtain.
Yeah, and John and Stephanie and producer Hannah, you think about private conversation, when you're having lunch or coffee with someone, and all of a sudden it's like, oh, my God, I got a meeting at 9 and it's 5 till, and I'm 15 minutes away. Mm-hmm. It was just good conversation. I want to return to it.
And when we say we're up against a break, we mean that we're about to get booted out of this segment.
Yeah. And things just automatedly happen, and that's what happened. But I want to pick this up again because I found some of the details, because all of you out there, I'm telling you, Hannah, am I the only one let me check the text line here. Am I the only one that's getting a little bit ticked off at spending in elite places that control our lives and who their candidates are and want our money to help elect those candidates? And then you go like, what are you doing? Okay, Outdoor John says, Randy, you shouldn't quit the NRA because of the alleged indiscretions of one man. The NRA is composed of millions of freedom lovers, going to withhold judgment of Wayne until his court case is over. He was convicted. I mean, well, not convicted, but I don't think it was Letitia James went after him. Was it a civil trial? I don't know. Sam says so we were talking about donations to the NRA. Wayne LaPierre, was found like in a Trump-esque way, guilty of just a lot of lavish spending, helicopter rides for executives who didn't want to sit in traffic. Excuse me. We all sit in traffic. Sorry, deal with it. If you're donating to Republicans, you are not donating to conservative causes. Republicans are not conservatives, says Sam. Wow. So there you go. Okay. We're going to circle back to that in a second, but we want to remind you, yesterday was the first day of filing. Hot news, Kurt Schaefer from right here in mid-Missouri, Columbia area, filed for CD3.
He did. And then, let's see, but we had heard, so Taylor Burks did not file for CD3.
No.
Neither did Justin Hicks. We had heard maybe State Representative Justin Hicks would get in. He, I think, formed an exploratory committee. He did not file yesterday. Other people who didn't file, State Treasurer Vivek Malik didn't file. Now, you still have time to file, right?
He's supposed to speak tomorrow night.
Well,
I'll have to ask him.
We're saying they didn't file yesterday.
That was the first
mean
day.
That they're not going to file.
Because it can be a strategic thing to wait, right?
Oh,
If some people think that ballot order matters, and so if you were there yesterday, you drew a number, and so but if you missed yesterday, then maybe you wait till the end and then you're last. That could be a play.
Maybe
right?
Vivek Malik was busy trying to figure out ways to expand the Mo Plus, small business loans, give people more of their money that the state owns.
He was not. He was under fire in a House committee most of the day for putting his messaging about unclaimed property on illegal machines, illegal slot machines and gas stations. Yeah.
Wow,
so he was busy yesterday.
This is interesting.
Yeah,
but he got the word out to the people. Maybe if they get the unclaimed property, they won't be at the illegal slot machines.
There was bipartisan
they may put it right back into the illegal slot machine.
There was bipartisan agreement that the message shouldn't have been on there, and I think even he said yesterday that he was going to pull it.
All right. And Caleb Rowden hasn't filed yet.
He hasn't filed yet either. Other people that, I think those are the big ones of people that we didn't see show up yesterday. That, again, that doesn't mean that they're not going to file, but some people that maybe you would have expected to file on the first day.
All right. So now Brian Hauswirth just walked into the studio. He was writing out his check to the NRA. And Brian, I want to tell you, before you write out and finish on that check, you are the RNC. If you want to write out that check to the RNC, listen to this. So, folks, if you're just joining the show, I have an axe to grind. We're going to grind it because I want you to hold the people to whom you're donating feet to the fire. In every other nonprofit organization, there's a watchdog group where you can get on and you say, how much of the money goes to administration? Okay. This is a Newsweek article from December regarding the Republican National Committee's spending in a context of, at that time, the governing body reported its lowest bank balance at that point in any year since 2016. Okay.
And that's a really good, because we wouldn't be having this conversation if we had a ton of cash on hand. I mean, the DNC has so much more money than the RNC. And if we were flush with cash, we wouldn't be going line by line. I mean, this article says, oh my gosh, can you believe we paid for 64 trips to Starbucks in 11 months? Hannah, how many times have you been to Starbucks in a year? I bet it's more than 67. Like, that's not a lot.
Should I throw my hat in for the RNC? Okay. Instead of Starbucks, I'm going to give people a Keurig machine and some pods. And I'll even they could even have exotic pods. They could have maybe a special Jamaican pods if they want.
The Civet Cat coffee.
There you go. I mean, Black Rifle pods. We're going to do some serious, cost cutting when money is what buys elections. And our money's going to, the Ritz-Carlton in Dallas, Texas in October, $75,000. Fast food expense. And you know what's low down on the list? McDonald's. 23 transactions at McDonald's. I want to see 200 transactions at McDonald's. I want to see I want to see Laura Trump eating at McDonald's, and then I'll donate.
But maybe those Starbucks trips were actually cost cutting, because you know what they weren't? They weren't steak dinners, and they were most likely meetings between her and someone else, and she said, let's go grab coffee. And you know what you weren't paying for was Ruth's Chris or Morton's or whatever it is.
Oh, I'm sure I was paying for that too. Okay. So I don't know. And you maintain that this is the DNC as well? That they do the same?
Yes. I mean, the liberal coastal elites, you think they're eating at McDonald's? No.
I don't know. How come the news media isn't going after them?
Because they have
the liberal media.
And they have a ton of cash. And so, everyone starts looking at the expenses when suddenly you're out of cash, and we don't have that much cash right now. And so
I can relate.
Right?
The bank account hits zero. You go, what the heck happened?
LaPierre buying limousine rides, private jet charters. I mean, I know, and someone says, Randy, there's a bunch of freedom-loving, gun-loving people, and this is not about the people who support them. This is, in fact, in respect for the people. Many of you out there, I'm a lifetime NRA member, right? And now I'm thinking they keep appealing for more money. I think I'm going to go to Gun Owners of America and look at them. I don't know.
But for many of these really big organizations, you want really good leadership. And where do you go for that leadership? Especially on the Republican side, you go to the private sector. And so in order to attract and retain the best talent among leadership, you have to match probably a lifestyle that they are used to.
Does a lot of money and a lot of limousine and a lot of hoity-toity Four Seasons hotel make you a good leader? No. I know a lot of good leaders. There are dozens of leaders here in Columbia, Missouri that lead great small businesses, many of which sponsor our show and our station. They could be awesome leaders. They wouldn't require helicopter rides. Okay, enough said. Brian Hauswirth joins us now.
Well, it really gets back to I really think the success of politics is all. Tip O'Neill said it best. All politics is local and grassroots. That's you're going to say something.
Well, yeah, no. Brian brings up a really good point, because if you want to talk about cost cutting, if we went to statewide Lincoln Days in Kansas City, and it was all people could talk about was the quality of the hotel. So
not good.
No. Yeah. So I mean, the Missouri GOP is budget friendly. So
good.
If you want to give your money, as Brian was saying, stay local.
I think we need to be truth seeking here. If there are people, you come to the Lincoln, the Boone County Lincoln Days tomorrow night, and Stephanie's going to speak on the Decline to Sign movement, right?
Yes.
And I saw another one. I stopped in at Aldi's to get some toothpicks for the fondue last night. They didn't have it, but there was a guy out there. And I was going to approach him. I was in one of those fighting moods. I figured I'm not going to go there. Another guy asking for the IP signatures.
And they're doing that. There's a multiple signatures out there that are out there. And IP, I know that they're going to get a lot of attention. Stephanie's touched on the filing. I want to say something about the filing. I think that's very important. And we, of course, will have Will Scharf on. I was in Jefferson City yesterday and talked to Congressman Graves and talked to Congressman Jason Smith. And Missouri has two very powerful, two as high up as they get, Ways and Means and also transportation. But two main observations I don't think have gotten a lot of attention. In District 44, which is Cherie Tolson's Reich's district, Hallsville, parts of it's the northern tip of Columbia, but the area basically northeast Columbia, that area, it's been redistricted. Very Republican. This is a bright red district. 2 Republicans have filed. Now, one is a very familiar name to our audience, John Martin, who is pro-pumping and hydrojetting, and then a guy named Bryce Beal, B-E-A-L, from Ashland. I don't know Bryce, but he is also filed. Stephanie
knows a lot about Bryce.
You know Bryce. Dave Rathel, who has run against Cherie Tolson-Reich and routinely comments on 93.9 The Eagle Facebook page.
In the last cycle, he called Cherie Tolson-Reich a fascist, if I'm not mistaken.
And he said some other stuff on our Facebook page, but he has filed as well.
Interesting character,
which is interesting. But I also think for the Democrats, Crystal Quaid and if you look yesterday at her feed, they have really tried to prioritize trying to at least find candidates in some of these districts that had gone uncontested before. And maybe they'll win some of these. We'll have to wait and see. But Adrienne Plank filed for re-election. So did David Tyson Smith from Columbia, as did Kathy Steinhoff. And then, of course, Jim Schulte over in New Bloomfield. And last but not least, Doug Mann, who's a freshman Democrat from Columbia. He is not filing. So there'll be a new. She's not going to run again.
Jim Schulte gets my vote because remember he brought us bacon. He brought me a piece of bacon at the governor's breakfast.
He was there.
Automatically, Jim's a shoe-in. Jim, we love you.
Heavily involved in the I-70 project.
All right, hey, Brian Hauswirth covering all. can store it and use it next year.
Bank it back.
Time for What's Hot with Anna.
I will briefly recap the cheese gate argument we were having yesterday.
Oh, string cheese?
Yeah.
Stephanie says it's not cheese. You and I said it did.
Yeah, Stephanie was trying to tell us that string cheese is not, in fact, cheese. We looked at the ingredients of several of our favorite brands, and there's only like 5 ingredients tops, and milk was always the first one.
Yes.
Survey says 38.9% of people voted and said that no, string cheese does not qualify as a real cheese. The winner, weighing in with 61.1% of votes, is yes.
Woo!
So
that's almost as many votes as a percentage as Donald Trump got. He beat Nikki Haley substantially yesterday in the Michigan primary.
Yeah, but string cheese isn't pulling out of the race.
Oh, but look at that little pun in there, a little pulling
it.
out. I like that. Good for you.
No, to get into What's Hot with Hannah, now that it's 7:26 almost, this is more where I'm comfortable starting, okay?
Oh, okay. Look at this.
I
give her the stage, and she says I'm out of material. Look at this.
No, I'm just saying I'm used to starting at 7:26.
I'm telling you.
Okay.
We're turning over a new leaf. My resolutions take a while to simmer and marinate, and then they'll come into play.
One of the lightning poll questions on the Today Show's website for this week is, would you pay more for your favorite fast food at peak times of the day? So
I saw that.
Have you seen this?
Surge pricing.
Yeah.
Yeah, surge pricing. So, let's say noon, busy lunch rush. Would you pay a few cents more for your combo meal in the drive-thru because it's a busy time? And I guess B, would that also cut down on some of the traffic that goes through there to shorten lines and wait times? I don't know. But Wendy's basically kind of came out and said that they were going to be implementing this surge pricing starting in 2025. And the internet, had opinions, as the internet does. And the Wendy's CEO had to issue another statement saying, oh, no, we didn't mean it like that. Which, right, sure.
I mean,
I don't know. I think how would the timeliness of the delivery of that higher priced food affect your willingness to pay for it?
Don't we kind of already have that in reverse? Because there's always been like an early bird special that if you eat dinner at 5, you get a discount, right? And so then the people who eat at 7 during the surge time pay full rate. I don't know that I really have a problem with this, but also us weird radio people keep weird hours, so now I am like an early bird dinner person, and then I eat lunch at like 10:30. So.
I know our coworkers in the office, when they see us eating lunch, 9:30, 10 o'clock, they're like, why are you eating mac and cheese at 10 in the morning?
Hannah, I think I would
because I can.
That's
exactly.
Right. I would only be willing to pay a little surcharge for the surge pricing if the food was as timely or timelier than at other times. Because why else are you paying for it, right? Just because, it's popular then? No. But I would be infuriated and probably not return to the establishment if I paid a surcharge and I waited longer because it was surge time.
I think that's kind of where I'm at, right? Like if you're going to raise the price and I also still have to wait in a long line, that feels like a lose-lose to me as a consumer.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's only a couple cents. So is it enough for people to even like change their behavior? I know, we talk about, no, I don't think so.
It's the principle of the matter.
We say that when like we get like local taxing, like a TIF or something. Yeah. Like, I'm not going to go to that shopping mall. I'm going to go over here. And you know what? I still go where the TIF is because it's a couple cents and I forget and I don't,
Well,
or like when people say they're going to stop listening and they come back in 2 weeks.
Now, wait. Now, Ed says, sorry, Randy, Stephanie's right. If you're looking for a multi-$100,000 donor or $1 million donor, a more important litmus test would be the efficiency at the dollars spent to the dollars raised. Okay.
Woohoo, I'm right. I might be wrong about cheese, but I'm right about the RNC.
Gotta take what you can get, Steph.
We were talking about Jim Schulte. Missourian, and you worked for Joe Biden's Justice Department. Man, they're tearing you up, brother. What do you have to say?
Yeah, look, they're seeing the same poll numbers that we're seeing, which shows that we're closing in on Andrew. Day by day, this race is getting tighter and tighter and tighter, and they're scared. So instead of attacking my record, they're leveling baseless personal attacks and calling me funny names. It's like a campaign for fifth grade class president. The people of Missouri are going to be able to see through that. We feel great about the grassroots support we have all over the state. And ultimately, I think this race is going to be won on the issues, not on funny names. So,
I know you filed yesterday, Will, Brian here, and we appreciate you joining us live. The Attorney General, Andrew Bailey, did file as well. And then we also have a Democratic candidate who's filed, and there may be others. His name is Elad Gross, and a lot of our listeners may know him. He has run before. What are some of the issues you're focusing on in this race? Priorities, if elected as Attorney General, top couple of priorities you'd focus on off the bat.
Yeah, look, just at a very broad level, I think we have a real problem in this state with special interest and lobbyist capture of Jefferson City. I think the agenda in Jefferson City fundamentally is set by a very small number of lobbyists, powerful special interests, and I think that just doesn't serve the people of Missouri. So I'm not a Jefferson City insider. I'm a political outsider, a conservative. I think we'll bring a very different approach to governing in Jefferson City than we've seen out of our political leadership for a very long time. In terms of specific issues, I think the core responsibility of the Missouri Attorney General's office is protecting Missourians' rights. I think we need to build a very strong Attorney General's office full of smart young conservatives who can go out and do that work. Sometimes that's going to involve things like suing the federal government. Other times it's going to involve holding state and local bureaucrats accountable, which has just been a real problem in this state over the last few years. And then lastly, I think we need to really focus on crime issues. I think our cities increasingly have just a totally intractable crime problem. And through inaction on the part of Jefferson City, that problem seems to be getting worse, not better. If the state's going to have a bright future, we need to combat and defeat violent crime, and I think the AG's office can play a key role in that.
Will Scharf, candidate for Missouri Attorney General, joins us on Wake Up Mid-Missouri this morning.
Well, the story we have to cycle back to because it just came out of left field for everybody. Representative Unsiker's comments about you and Elad Gross being sleeper Israeli unregistered agents and all. I know you've commented on that, but gosh, have you gotten back past that weird piece of bad press?
Yeah, I mean, she hit Elad worse than she did me. It was just deeply weird. I think my quote at the time was that Sarah Unsiker is so far down the rabbit hole, even the rabbits think she's crazy. And I stand by that. It was just a very weird incident that I don't think any of us really expected in this race. I guess the Democrats yesterday refused to allow Unsiker to file as a Democrat for governor. I think that's positive, and I don't think it'll really have any impact on the race. It was just very, very strange.
And you are correct on that. The Democrats did essentially, and you reported it, Randy, as did I. You have to run for office. You got to get basically certification from a party. They declined it. It's a little complex, but Will is absolutely correct. I want to ask a quick follow-up. Will, you mentioned priorities. We did have Andrew Bailey on the show last week, and I know it's a local issue, but very important, I think. Columbia City Council has approved a 4-page LGBTQ ordinance, and they had 3 hours of testimony. They were worried they were going to violate the fire code. They had that many people. I mean, people literally lined up out the door. General Bailey said on this show he believes that ordinance, 4 pages, violates religious freedoms. And I know you've been busy campaigning. Have you had a chance to look at that ordinance, and any thoughts on that?
I haven't seen the ordinance, but we've seen blue jurisdictions in this state and around the country completely flout religious liberty and pass just insane measures exactly like that. I think the AG's office needs to be taking a proactive, aggressive role on that, whether it's sunshining localities, school districts, filing lawsuits where appropriate. I think that's something that's very, very important. And as I said before, protecting Missourians' rights needs to be the highest and first responsibility for the Attorney General's office. One thing that I will say is that Bailey's office has been very quick to fire off letters, but much slower to actually file lawsuits and legal process. And I've said before that I think Andrew is running a highly effective press operation, but a much less effective legal operation. They've seen about 30% attorney turnover since Eric Schmidt left office in just the last year. There's some real problems there. So I think we would take a very aggressive approach on these sorts of issues, and I like to think we would do a better job than the current folks running the show there.
Will, in a related, I want to ask you a question that people through the last not year or two or 4 or 5 or 10 have talked to me about, but these are everyday folks on the street who have a problem with a roofing company who's a fly-by-night after a hailstorm, or a dent fix company, or a dispute with a metropolitan, with a civil authority, a political subdivision. And they feel as though because the Attorney General, and this is not directed as much at A.G. Bailey's office as it is every other office that seems to aspire to hire, Josh Hawley, Eric Schmidt, and these are good Republican people, right? People tell me, wow, I called the AG's office and they seem to be more interested in the high-profile headline cases that are politically expedient than they are in getting after the people that wronged me, that accused me of something, or that, scammed me. Is that a matter of it's not a jurisdiction within the AG's office, or not enough staffing, or not enough interest, or all of the above, or something I'm not mentioning?
No, consumer protection is a core responsibility of the Attorney General's office. And we've heard from people all over the state that they've filed very serious consumer protection claims with that office and heard nothing back in response. I think that's a staffing issue. I think it's a prioritization issue. If you get good, conservative, smart lawyers in that office, though, if you staff it up the way that it's supposed to be, we can do a lot to address exactly that kind of scam, that kind of problem, and we can make Missouri a much less safe state for people who would go about scamming their fellow citizens. I think that's very important.
Yeah. And finally, it's been mentioned that you were a senior advisor to former Governor Eric Greitens, and that I'm just as a candidate for statewide office. What did you learn from that experience and from the Greitens era that may help you? Should you be elected AG?
Yeah, look, I think that the Greitens administration didn't end the way that any of us were hoping. But in the year and a half that we were there, we were very successful at moving the ball downfield on a wide range of conservative policy issues. I'm very proud of the work we did, for example, calling a special session on life issues in the summer of 2017. We cut taxes. We passed needed labor and tort reform. We deregulated probably more than any administration in Missouri history. I'm not happy with the way that administration ended, but I'm pretty proud of the policy record we had while we were there. And getting around the state, Missouri Republicans seem to agree that I haven't really heard anti-Greitens hits as something that's really bothering people on the stump right now. And most people think that Eric Greitens was to the right of where our current government in Jefferson City is. Mm-hmm. So I'm not too worried about that. It's obviously it's part of my history, but I'm proud of the work we were able to get done while we were there.
I know.
Will, you've been right in the middle of the criticizing the Justice Department over how they've handled the Trump case. I mean, you're part of the legal team and all. Hunter Biden headed back to Capitol Hill. Any takeaways from this, or just more of the same?
Well, it's the two-tiered system of justice we've seen where a different set of rules applies to Democrats. I mean, Hunter Biden is example number one of that. During the Trump administration, Don Jr. and Eric, they sat for hours and hours and hours of depositions. Meanwhile, Hunter thumbs his nose at congressional subpoenas, requests to testify, and nothing seems to happen to him. I think the way that his criminal cases have been handled speak to that as well. The attempt at sort of ramming through a sweetheart deal in Delaware federal court. The Biden DOJ has gone totally off the reservation. And the weaponization of the Department of Justice and our system of law enforcement and the courts more generally to pursue President Biden's political opponents, it's one of the most dangerous developments in American history. And I'm proud as a member of President Trump's legal team to be fighting back against those efforts every day.
Yeah, it's really a travesty. Everyday Americans wonder, like, what, am I next? If some prosecutor doesn't agree with my politics, I write in, I call in, I host a conservative talk show. I mean, people begin to wonder. And, it's got to be set
worth
straight.
Noting, President Trump has a First Amendment right to run for office, but every single American citizen also has a reciprocal First Amendment right to vote for a candidate of their choice, to campaign for a candidate of their choice, to communicate with other people about who they're choosing to run for office. When Joe Biden and his team interfere with the election by pushing forward these indictments, by pushing forward these cases in courtrooms across America, they're not just interfering with President Trump's constitutional rights. They're actually also interfering with each and every one of our constitutional rights. Mm-hmm. It's just a tremendous violative act that really strikes to the core of the American Republic, and I'm hopeful that we win in again and again and again in the coming weeks and months.
Will, aside from your candidacy for Attorney General, I'd like you to comment on your current thoughts about how what seems to be a growing tide of support for pro-Palestinian / pro-Hamas activities over in Gaza among young people, an increasingly important block in the electorate.
Yeah, look, I think the rise of anti-Semitism on the left in particular in American society today, I think it's deeply concerning to all Jews. I think it's deeply concerning to many non-Jewish Americans as well. I think it's deeply weird, but I think it's the result of the rise of intersectionality as the organizing principle on the modern left, that when you see oppression everywhere and when all oppression is linked, it's like if you only have a hammer, everything looks like a nail. So the idea that you would have a group called Queers for Palestine when Hamas regularly executes homosexual people, it's a very
otters, and a prairie dog. The man had the animals stuffed into 3 separate socks and taped into his boxers. Officers say they became suspicious about the large bulge below the man's waistband. They say he admitted to buying them in a market in the city. They were taken to a conservation area. The suspect was arrested. Thai Customs Department spokesman said, quote, "We will catch anyone who tries to take animals on planes, no matter if they hide them down their pants or buy them a seat." I think the important takeaway was that the otters were described as small clawed otters. And in your boxers, that'd probably be a good thing.
Yeah. Now we call that the...
Now you know the rest of that story.
That's the Sandy Berger maneuver, isn't it?
It
In a
is.
different construct? Yeah.
There you go.
And now the ladies on the show here were talking yesterday about the, what were you calling it? The light jerseys?
The new MLB uniforms, which are...
That wouldn't have worked out well for this guy either.
Nope.
Yeah. Nope.
There's no hiding anything in the new uniforms.
Yeah.
Not even your dignity.
Maybe especially.
Yeah, it's pretty bad for anyone that's not aware of what we're talking about.
Yeah.
Spring training just started. Got some new Major League Baseball uniforms hitting the field. Nike and Fanatics have teamed up to, produce these new jerseys. And Nike has a new innovative fabric that's really lightweight and airy and breathable.
And see-through.
There you go. Especially the teams that wear white pants, they're having some troubles.
One of my favorite accounts, John, is the TSA Instagram. Hannah, do you follow them?
I don't.
TSA?
Yeah, TSA has one of the best Instagrams of all time, I think. And it's just TSA. And they post regularly pictures of what people try to bring through airport security.
Yeah.
And it is insane. And they'll also give you a hint of one of the more recent ones, someone opened a toothpaste tube and had shoved things in a Colgate tube to try to hide it, and they're like, we found you out.
You're kidding me.
Well, there was a TV show about one of the major airports in the U.S., and a lot of it was customs, just going through people's bags and finding things that they tried to sneak across, that they didn't claim in customs.
For a while, there was a lot of drug running with, plastic bags in body cavities, various cavities.
Well, even just
bottom cavities.
Even just weird stuff that, agricultural products, things like that you're not supposed to bring from other countries.
Well, those invasive species that can be brought in can be devastating. There's no doubt about that. I know Hawaii is very, very careful about that. And so that they don't want you bringing anything, and vice versa. The mainland doesn't want people bringing things in from Hawaii. So it's the same way.
So it makes it, I guess, if we cycle back to the see-through baseball pants of Cardinal Mason Wynn, makes it that much tougher for him to steal second, right?
Yeah. Next thing you'll see people like Beyonce and Taylor Swift wearing those on stage, just to give a little
I
glance.
highly doubt it.
You don't think so?
No.
They wear pretty see-through-y kind of stuffy.
Not Taylor.
Really gonna go there?
Not Taylor, but the others do. I'm just talking in general, the stars. They wear yesterday.
Yeah, so Kurt, I think we were just talking off air that you were last in public office in January of 2017, so a bit of a break. So for those folks who are maybe newer to the area and not as familiar, talk about your history in public service.
I will do that, but first of all, good morning, Randy.
Good morning. Thanks
Stephanie.
for being with us. We're excited you're here.
Jumping right into
We're
it
excited
there.
you're here.
Yep, I'm glad to be here. Thanks for having me on. So, I got elected to the Missouri Senate in 2008. I was the second Republican ever. I won that race, so I was the second Republican ever to serve in that Senate seat. And then when I got reelected in 2012, I was the first Republican ever to hold the Senate seat here in the 19th Senate District for 2 terms. Now, Caleb Rowden has done that after me, so, maybe not quite as exciting, but I was the first, so I'm gonna say that. But, I enjoyed that time. During that time for you get 8 years in the Senate because you get 2 4-year terms under term limits. But 6 of those years, which is a record number also, I was the chairman of the Senate Appropriations Committee, delivered a balanced budget for 6 straight years, cut over $1 billion out of that budget over that time frame on Medicaid spending and abuse and other things. I mean, the biggest reason obviously being we didn't have the money, and unlike the federal government in the state of Missouri, when we don't have the money, we don't spend it. Sponsored legislation actually for a balanced budget amendment for the federal government. Pushed that several times. Unfortunately, could not get enough of my colleagues to go along with that. Also would have put in place term limits on Congress people, which I think there should be in place. But I do miss being in a position to get conservative values carried out in Missouri. And I'll tell you the other thing, too, and we're going to get into this. But what's happening in this country right now is unbelievable. And everyone in this room, and I think everyone listening, if you went back 15 years and you showed people an image of what America is today with virtually no borders and virtually no law enforcement. And when I say no law enforcement, I mean, we've got great law enforcement here in Boone County. But there are places in this country where there is no law enforcement.
Did you say no secure borders? Where have you been, Kurt? Alejandro Mayorkas says we have secure borders.
Think about this: 8 million illegals in the last 3 years. That's more than the population of 36 states, including Missouri. Well, I can go on forever on this, but
let's talk about you. I mean, anytime a race opens up, your name has always been on the short list since you've been out of public service. So when these statewide appointments were coming up, your name was regularly mentioned. And I think especially in mid-Missouri, you were always kind of considered, hey, he'd be a front runner if he decides to get in. You're finally getting in. So what is it about Congressional District 3 that you said, yep, this is my race, I'm in?
Well, first of all, I'm honored that when other positions have come up that, people have asked me would I be interested to step in. And I think there's one really big reason for that. And I think that's what my legislative record shows is I get things done. And so yesterday I got asked same question by your frequent guest, Scott Fawn. And he said, why are you running? And I said, well, in the words of Toby Keith, a little less talk and a lot more action. And I think the one thing that I am known for is getting things done. And so I think when some of those spots open up and people say, you know what, we don't need any more people in public office who simply want to be political influencers online. We need people who actually want to go do the job. I think my name comes to the top.
Senator, we appreciate you joining us. It's always good to see you.
It's always good to see you, too.
As always. You chaired appropriations, obviously, in the Missouri Senate, and a very lot of budget debates over the years. And during that time, you also worked with Chris Kelly, a prominent Democrat, Stephen Weber, prominent Democrat, and Kip Kendrick very briefly as well. I mentioned those in that you worked with some Democrats as well. What are some issues, if you are elected to this post, you think you could work with, let's say, an Emmanuel Cleaver, somebody like that, on something that would help Missouri, much like you did with Boone County in your role as appropriations chair, because in many of those issues, they were bipartisan.
Well, I'll flip that on you a little bit, because I think that when I was chair of the committee, I controlled a lot of things in that committee. And I think obviously this is Boone County, and we've got a lot of Democrats elected from Boone County who, rightfully so, wanted to get some things done. And I think they wanted to work with me to actually get some things done. So you can kind of look at that from 2 different perspectives. But, my legislative record, we did cut over $1 billion out of that budget while I was chair. And we did a lot of things. We defunded Planned Parenthood, and I did that in a way that the court could not throw it out. Unfortunately, they haven't done it that way since, and it's been a problem in the courts. And we can go on about that. But I would say that, you got some Democrats in all over the state who, if they want to get things done, they got to work with Republicans. So I'd put that out there. But that answer your question?
But transportation would be one that.
Well, here's the other thing too, and it goes back to the appropriations issue. We never spent more money than we had, and we were judicious in how we spent that money. We don't see that in the federal government. It's killing our kids, and they're going to be carrying this debt. I mean, we've got a level of debt now that I know that when we had debates on the budget, back when I was approach chair, where we talked about basically the ratio of public debt to gross domestic product. We said, well, boy, if we ever get above gross domestic product on debt, we're never going to come back. Well, we've blown past that in the recent years with Joe Biden. So that's an issue. And again, the border obviously is a huge issue in this election. The fentanyl's killing our kids. And now, there's another story today where you've got another illegal who came to the country, no vetting, actually got arrested. Again, this is a similar story. It's a broken record. Who got arrested for other crimes, not detained, not held, ultimately ends up killing a child in this country. And between the fentanyl and, frankly, the straight-out murder as a former prosecutor, I'm not putting up with that anymore.
Former State Senator Kurt Schaefer, newly announced for his candidacy for CD3, filing yesterday, joins us on Wake Up Mid-Missouri.
Senator, some of us can go back to the days of you at the Blue Note playing bass for third up.
Right.
But we won't get into that. You were talking about your time.
We can get it all you want. I loved playing in a band when I was in college.
Talk about your time on approach at the Capitol. That got a little volatile. I guess the question I'm leading up to is the guy you bumped heads with was working at the law department at the University of Missouri, who's now our junior senator, Josh Hawley. If you get elected to Congress, could you work with Josh?
Yeah, Josh and I speak every now and then. So I don't see anything there. And then Eric Schmidt, obviously our other senator, is my former law partner, and we served all 8 years together in the Senate. And I just talked to Eric just Saturday. You raise the university, and obviously, in the Senate seat, the university is the largest employer in the district and extremely important to hardworking people here in mid-Missouri. But it's also important, to the entire state of Missouri, not just the 3rd Congressional District. I do think, I'll just tell you, I think Moon Choi at the university right now is doing a fantastic job. And I think the university is in a position, and it's interesting you raise that, because I look back at that kind of 2014, 2015 timeframe. The university was not in a good place. But I will tell you, the university now is in a substantially better place. And it shows. I think it shows in the successes they've had. They've got big issues coming up with the research reactor, which provides, radioactive medicine for not only mid-Missouri, but for the entire country. And they have plans on that. And frankly, I hope I can help them with that.
Now, you're entering a crowded field. You've got some other folks already in the CD race. You've got, you talked about your record. People like Senator Mary Elizabeth Coleman has a pretty strong record. She can run on. Senator Onder, former Senator Onder, has a lot of money. And so it's going to take a lot of money
that's true,
to run this race. And so how do you see a path forward with such a crowded field? We've heard that there might be other people in the race. There's still time to file, obviously. So
sure. First of all, I've known, Bob for over 15 years, good friends with Mary Elizabeth. And I think the distinction is, and what you're going to find is, first of all, my record actually of conservative accomplishments on the budget, on pro-life issues, on Second Amendment issues. Keep in mind, in 2014, we had Amendment 5 on the ballot, which actually, it added language to Article 1, Section 23 of the Missouri Constitution, which is your right to keep and bear arms under the Missouri Constitution. I wrote that language. I got it passed out of the legislature. I got it on the ballot, passed by almost 70%. Missouri right now, because of that, has some of the strongest language in the country on your right to keep and bear arms. So I'll put that record up against anybody. I think the distinction that you're going to find there is who can actually get things done, and not just say they can get things done, but has a solid record of getting things done, as opposed to complaining. Because the other reason I'm in this race, just like I said, a little more talk and a lot more action. I'm tired of everyone talking, and not getting things done.
Let's drill down on that a little bit, because recent national and dare I say even state politics has illustrated that the social issues don't seem to be winners for GOPers when it comes to general elections. They're winners in the primary. I'm talking about abortion. I'm talking about social issues, particularly abortion. And nationally this time, and I think it'll filter down to a general in Missouri, will be, you talk about getting things done. It's going to be border security, right, and economy on the conservative side of the ledger versus the abortion issue on the Democrat side. GOP hasn't done well on the social issues. How are you going to balance social versus economic and border security issues in your campaigning and in your public policy positions?
I think if you talk to people, not just in the 3rd Congressional District, but all over the state of Missouri, their main issue, and I think this is an issue for the country, their main issue is border security and crime. And crime is out of control, and it's directly related to the border security. But that is going to be the issue. And it's got to be fixed. Obviously, I've got a very strong record on all of those issues. But the thing is, until we close that border, we get that under control. And the thing that kills me, too, is the left and the media right now are saying, oh, well, Joe Biden's looking at doing something about the border. It's in his hands right now. No other single individual in the country has the ability to fix that problem today like Joe Biden does. And he will not do it. And people say, I get this question. People say, well, okay, so you've got the terrible situation in Georgia, where you've got an undocumented alien who came into the country. Nobody knew who he was. They just let him in, like they've been letting in 8 million other people in the last 3 years. They let him in. He gets arrested. He gets let go. He gets arrested. He gets let go. And ultimately, he murders a college student at the University of Georgia. And people say, well, this is going to get put squarely on Democrats. How can they bear that? And the reason is there is a purpose to what Democrats are doing in keeping that border open. Oh, yeah. And they will take those hits, like having those terrible stories that come out, which none of us should ever accept, because there's a bigger picture issue here, and that is getting 8 million people, and I'm sure they want more, into the country so that they can go to districts. Because remember, when they do the census, they don't count citizens, they count people. And you got Democrat blue state areas that are losing population, and you get more and more of them in those states. It gives them better representation in Congress, which is what they're trying to get, and it gives them better position in the presidential race.
What's your thoughts about subsidies and public taxpayer support for what could become a 4th entitlement program, namely daycare?
On daycare, Look, I think the hardworking people do need access, but I think you've got to balance that. But that's no different than all those other issues that we dealt with when I was chairman of appropriations, where you say, okay, what is welfare and what is making sure we have a strong economy? And I think you got to have those debates, and I think that'll be part of it.
All right, Kurt Schaefer just filed for CD3. It's going to be an interesting race on the heels of Blaine Luetkemeier's, I think, surprise retirement announcement. And,
those are big shoes to fill. Blaine has done a great job.
closed up 0.17%, NASDAQ up 0.37%, but the Dow down 0.25% this morning. And looking at the futures, ooh, yikes, everything's in the red, and pretty significantly NASDAQ looking at 0.5% in the red as the markets are set to open this morning. I think yesterday, let me just double check. I think utilities and communication services were up yesterday, energy down yesterday, driving the markets.
So what's driving is, and I guess there's some inflation news coming out later this week. So maybe there's just that uncertainty that seems to drive things down. More structure, more solid ground, things go up, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of uncertainty going on
well,
right
plus
now.
we have another financial cliff ahead, at least for many sectors in terms of federal funding, right?
Yeah, I would say I think as we approach the government shutdown every time,
everyone gets nervous.
You kind of see that in the markets. Hannah shared the story with me this morning, and I thought, they're still around? They've been closed here in Columbia for a very long time, but Macy's announced yesterday, or perhaps this morning, that they are set to close. That they announced Tuesday, 150 underperforming Macy's stores. Now, the Columbia Macy's has been, somebody's going to let me know what date that was, but they've been closed for years and years, and that property sat vacant. But they're saying, we've got to downsize here, and so they're getting rid of a lot of square footage. They're considering... they put up for sale their flagship store in San Francisco.
Whoa.
So you think, is it the crime? Is it that? What is it about, these retail stores? Is everyone shopping online?
It's Amazon.
It's hard to say, but, you think about, when's the last time you were in a traditional shopping mall?
But, the other day, my wife and I were talking. I was like, isn't it fun to be able to go over to Dillard's and just walk in and actually see racks of clothes and shop? I love to watch her put on clothes. I can't do that when she gets it from Amazon.
When I go to big cities, I go to the mall.
Right.
I really do. I still do. And so I think in some places, it makes sense. But certainly, they have, I think at one point they were up to 800 stores.
Yeah.
So now they're down to 350 locations.
But
it is sometimes nice to touch the clothes, to try them on, to see the quality in person. But, they've also, most of these stores have developed such good return policies that you can just order it, try it on in the comfort of your own home and send it back.
Not the same.
But, Hannah, when was the last time you were at a Macy's or in a mall?
In a mall last week.
Okay.
In a Macy's, it's been a while.
Well, and I will say it's difficult for if you need something really quickly, right? Like today, I need something. It's becoming harder and harder to find that immediately.
John, don't you enjoy once in a while if you're in the Dillard's or in another store with clothes? Don't you like looking at an array of ties, an array of shirts, an array of suits? And I like doing that. You can pick through things.
Boy, I think I'm kind of guilty as charged with the Amazon thing when it comes to ties and all. Well, you want to talk about the virtual marketplace? Look at the numbers Bitcoin's putting up right now.
That's
like 60,000 right now.
That is for real. Well, and Macy's has made cuts to their corporate staff. I think they did a 10 or 12% cut in January. But they're still making a lot of money. They were in the billions of dollars last year. And so they're hoping these cuts will save their company. Yeah. They posted $23 billion in sales last year.
I think of, I don't know. I just think of going to places like Bingham's downtown. I mean, what a beautiful clothery. There's a lot of good places like that. So let's keep supporting our local folks. Come on, guys.
Yes.
All right. Hey, what's up when we come back? I think what we better do is talk about telephonophobia. Let's talk about that when we come back on Wake Up Mid-Missouri.
Has America been fair to Donald Trump? The people always know what's going on.
because one of our listeners texted me and say, Randy, you're showing your age. Well, here we go. Telephone. I said, what age? He laughed. Telephonophobia apparently is really sweeping the millennial and Gen Z generation. So we have both millennials and Gen Z, right? You're millennial, right?
Yes.
And we have Hannah, who's Gen Z. And I notice John, have you noticed the way to the lady's brains is through the thumbs or through the, in my case, index fingers. It's through the texting because you guys prefer the texting, don't you?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. And I find it very difficult to communicate effectively that way.
I have a big NO on that.
Brian with a hot take.
The worst cities for telephonophobia are revealed. And the Daily Mail wrote this. And the metro areas tend to be, these areas tend to be Seattle's number 1, Frisco's 2, number 3 is Boston. The only Midwestern city where folks avoid talking on the phone predominantly is Chicago. But I don't know. I try to call people. I don't know. Stephanie doesn't answer my phone.
The
Hannah
quickest
doesn't
way,
answer my phone call.
the
I feel
quickest
so
way to
lonely.
make me cranky
Yeah.
is if I text you or email you and you immediately call me. Like if I wanted to talk to you on the phone, I would have called you.
I do that because usually if I have something substantial, something provocative, something that takes a conversation, it needs a conversation, not a quick text thing.
And I understand what Hannah's saying, but here's the problem. The problem is that things can be taken out of context, and I'm not even talking about anything, controversial. Just simple stuff can be taken out of context on a text if you don't understand it or if it's not written correctly. I've seen that several times where I've had to verify. A lawmaker will tell me something, and something basic, but it's just hard to tell what it is, and I have to follow up. So I do prefer the phone calls, but I think there is a general. I don't see as much conversation now. I don't think the young people are maybe more comfortable talking. I just don't know.
Many are socially awkward. Younger people, and I'm not talking about folks on this program, but the younger they are, the less comfortable they are with a conversation, especially with adults.
Hannah has admitted she doesn't like talking on the phone and like making phone calls. And actually, it's like kind of a trend on social media, and people will record, like the young people will record themselves. There was this one girl who was like, I'm going to do it. I'm going to order room service or whatever. And she literally called from her hotel room to order something on the phone, like just like a cheeseburger, and was like, had so much anxiety about it. I've seen the same thing. Like, I'm going to call the doctor's office today. I should get a gold star. Yeah. And like, they're like, I still have my mom make phone calls for me. And that is just ridiculous.
When I was in college, I lived in an apartment with 3 other girls for 2 years. And if we were going to order something for dinner, we would like fight over who had to call and place the order.
But how does this bode well for people who then want to enter the job world and have a job interview? I know everything's online. Frankly, that's why
not everything's online.
But the initial process. Sure. But then you have your interview, and a lot of people are going to struggle with that, right? Or a public speaking. If you're in some position where you have to then aspire to lead a pod, a department, a group, you're going to have to give presentations among 4 or 5 or more people. Maybe you'll have to go to the board and present. That I think it's really not serving young people well to not develop those conversational skills.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I also I think there's a combination. And I think it is important to stay as up to date on the technology as you can. We had that young boy in the studio, Ethan, just last week. He was 4 years old, and he had all these health issues, and I started crying talking to him. But the one that he knew how to use an iPad better than I would. I mean, 4 years old. So
that's
young.
Not saying much. I'm kidding you, Brian. I'm kidding you.
Good.
You know how to use an iPad. I know
absolutely.
that.
But I think he probably knows better than I do. But I do think communication in terms of being able to talk to people is very important, and in being able to have that. And for younger people out there, Randy, you'll remember this. Stephanie, I don't know when it's kind of stopped being a thing, but it used to be, the guys out there will remember this, when you had to ask the girl out on a date, you had to pick up the phone and call.
That's right.
You had to call, and it was usually a landline.
Yeah.
And
you got her dad on the other end.
And that happened many times, exactly.
But
a lot of that has changed, I realize. But that's literally what had to be done.
Well, apparently, is it Nathan Wade still believes that you need to pick up the phone to ask people out on a date?
Down there in
because
Fulton County.
I think they said there were 2,000 phone calls.
Wow. And more texts. 10,000 texts or something. I don't get it.
I don't think I've made 2,000 phone calls in the last year.
Now, mea culpa time, ladies. And those of you who are majority texters, texting has taught me that I don't speak as concisely in conversation as I should. So I've tried to learn to speak concisely, get to the point, because I know it's really annoying. I can just hear Hannah gnashing her teeth and wailing when I'm calling her. So I'm sorry. I'm trying to text converse.
And Randy got the dreaded question mark text from me yesterday.
He doesn't even know.
He doesn't know what it means.
Oh, man, we all know that one from Stephanie.
What is the question?
Respond yesterday.
Here, let me check the timestamps because it wasn't long.
What does that mean?
So
it means
Stephanie,
I'm waiting for a response.
Oh, I know. I almost gave you the Steve Martin meme. Like, excuse me, I was taking care of a patient at the time. Oh, you didn't respond? Question mark. Hello. I'm like, what do you want me to be glued to my?
The time lapse was 1 minute.
Oh, and sorry.
The question came at 5:39 last night, and the question mark came at 5:40.
That's what makes me nervous about the texting. I now feel I have another obligate responsibility to everyone who's got my text number. I give my number to everyone.
Well, see, I'm the opposite when it comes to texting, right? I like texting because I can read it whenever I get to it, right? I feel like texting is less invasive because if someone's busy when the text comes in, they can just put it back in their pocket and it's still sitting there waiting for them whenever they have time to acknowledge it.
Okay, but for the record now, see, I just learned something. Does a question mark connote urgency?
Yes.
It means
it's
waiting.
It's Stephanie going, hurry up.
See, you could tell how naive is Randy. I thought it was just a courteous, hey, just wondering, No. It's like, now.
First thing I said to Steph this morning was that the first time you've pulled the question mark on Randy?
Now I know. Okay, so there's a whole textese now that I need to go and take text as a second language somewhere. I mean, Columbia College, do they offer that? Does Mizzou offer a course, an adult education class as text as a second language?
Well, and Hannah has had to Hannah's had to educate me because apparently people in her generation think like if you use punctuation that's like stern or rude or right? Any punctuation.
Sometimes, like if someone asks how you are and you say fine, period, that seems a little
aggressive.
Now, wait a minute. Now, I remember, probably 8 years, 7, within the last decade, probably 5 to 7 years ago, attending a leadership deal. No, it was more than that. It was a decade ago. And there was a guy this was, I think, for physicians as leaders training. And there was a guy who was getting us all accustomed to working with young people who live on social media and who'd like to text. And one of the take-home messages I remember was, you have to put an exclamation point behind everything, right? Wow. It's like, good morning, Hannah. Exclamation point. Hannah, I just booked Kurt Schaefer for exclamation point. I mean,
I know,
if everything's an exclamation point, nothing's an exclamation point.
I abuse the exclamation point for sure.
It's like a meme for younger people, like in writing office emails, having to go back through when you're done and deleting all of your exclamation marks and putting a period instead.
So now when I'm wishing someone happy birthday or congratulating them on LinkedIn, I'm figuring, how can I ration the exclamation points to where when I do, wield one, it means something, right?
Yeah, and I do think communication in both forms is important. I do think it's important to know how to text and stuff, and being able to speak and have a conversation is important too. It really is.
Speaking of conversation and the importance of it, Brian, I hope you do a story. John, I hope you do a story. One of you, both of you, we need to do a story on misrepresentation of the initiative petition for abortion, because I was told by someone asking for signatures outside an exclusive membership club here in Columbia, where you can get loads of bulk items and buy way more than you'll ever eat or use, but that's another issue, and never leave the store for spending under $100. I was accosted the other day by a woman who claimed that I said, this is human rights. This is reproductive freedom. I said, no, this is a return to Roe, 23 weeks. I said that early in the conversation. And then I told her how, no, it actually, the language would hamstring the legislature, so they really couldn't restrict it for any significant meaning. And then as I walked away, I said, I'm not signing it. She said, well, it's just 16 weeks. 16 weeks? I'm sorry, I know a little bit about this. A 16-week baby outside the womb does not live. That's not a viable baby, right? So I don't know, and I'm concerned about misrepresentation. So Stephanie, tell us about it.
Well, it talks about fetal viability, but it says the legislature can regulate after fetal viability, but in any event, if the woman has an issue with mental health, physical health, or her life, then there has to be an exception.
So let's say it passes. Let's say it's on the ballot and it passes. Mm-hmm. Does that mean that as of that day, there's no regulation on abortion unless the legislature comes back next session and regulates it?
So what we're seeing in states like Ohio and Michigan, in Michigan, Governor Whitmer signed a whole bunch of bills repealing basically all the protections for women's health, all the parental rights for consent and notification. I don't think our legislature is going to repeal all of the pro-life legislation and protections for women's health that they spent years enacting. And so what in other states like Ohio, what they do, the Democrats have been, and even in Michigan, they'll go to the courts and say, we've got this new constitutional amendment. It invalidates all of these laws.
That's my question. That would be the next step, right?
Yeah, they will go straight to the courts. And even in Michigan, even though that the legislature repealed a whole bunch of their laws, the people on the very far left have identified even more and said they didn't go far enough. We've got to repeal all of this.
So the courts would have no choice but to say, hey, your no abortion in Missouri law is invalid. We now have a constitutional amendment. And then they'd have to go back and limit it, whatever they could limit it to viability, right? Which essentially is Roe.
It's going to be really tough. It would fundamentally change the way that.
So my point is, I am. Any of you out there gathering petitions, if you approach me, I'm going to turn on my voice recorder, and I'm going to ask you to make your pitch.
Sure.
And I may play it here on the air.
If that's legal. And the other side of that is,
because I want you to be accurate. Don't misrepresent it.
Well, a lot of times those people who are coming up to you asking you to sign petitions are, I don't know if I'd say uninvolved, but they're just individuals who are being paid a fee to go out and get signatures.
And they haven't read it necessarily.
Exactly. Don't have a dog in the hunt.
And there's also so many different abortion measures out there that are being proposed. That's why we can't really do a hit piece until it'd be more of a talk show. But if you can get them on tape saying it,
I'm going to get them on tape
and let them know.
I don't have to let them know, but being the gracious guy I am, I'm going to let them know.
Hang on, on tape?
Yeah,
are we recording it?
Oh, a digital audio file. Excuse me.
We do know which we do know which version they're circulating, but by law they're required to have the language with them. So if you flip, it's only one page. So typically what you see is their signatures on the front. If you flip it over, you can read the language. Demand to see the language.
But newsmakers, the news they're making, the decisions that you're deciding on, and the issues that are going to really shape your life, whether it's something that's happening in D.C., whether it's something happening in J.C., whether it's something happening in C.C., which would be not C.C. City Broiler, although that's a great place to be, but Columbia City, or Moberly, or Fulton, or Centralia, or California, our vast listening audience. We're going to keep in touch with those things. Now, leftovers, let's see what's on John's plate. John, what do you have for leftover?
Well, Chiefs Kingdom. Chiefs are weighing whether to use the infamous franchise tag on defensive tackle Chris Jones or star cornerback L'Jarius Sneed. Though Brent Veach, the GM, says he's hopeful they'll both be back, but otherwise doesn't happen. Free agents next month.
Okay, well, we'll have to see. And I guess Andy Reid's in negotiations. It's not a matter of what the terms are. He's going to re-sign, right? I mean, from what the reporting is. Yeah, I think so.
Big Red's going to stay in KC, I think, till his retirement. Sure sounds like it.
That guy is just so Midwestern feeling, isn't he? I mean, just the
former Mizzou coach.
Yeah, you just love the guy. Okay, Stephanie, what's on your plate?
I know Mizzou had a big event last night, giving away some awards, and some Mid-Mo friends were honored. I got to see Caleb Jones, who was formerly the elected representative in Mid-Missouri, and is now with the electric co-ops, but he was honored for his public service and his commitment. And so it was nice to see a lot of friends and a lot of support. Again, we heard it from former Senator Schaefer this morning. Mizzou's in such a good place right now, and people feel good about it and are happy to support it. And I think that's really good for Mid-Missouri. So congrats to all the award winners last night. And
good deal.
Mizzou.
Hannah, I brought you some chocolate this morning. You haven't even partaken of the chocolate. I brought you white chocolate even, and I haven't seen you partake of it.
I told you I was going to grab some before we left this morning.
I was hoping you'd do it on the air.
Well, I don't want to eat into my microphone. No one wants to listen to me chew.
Well,
please do not do that.
Exactly.
What's that phobia? There's a name for that. It's like
misophonia.
Yeah.
And now I just want, for those of you who may need an attorney sometime, I can't tell you who to hire, but I can tell you who not to hire. His name's Terrence Bradley, and he's the former law partner of Nathan Wade, who, well, let's just say he fell in love with Fannie Willis. And before he was hired by Fannie Willis, yesterday in his testimony, the poor guy was melting down on the stand. Here's just a little bit of it.
Judge in South Fulton. They met at...
Yeah, asked and answered.
All right, understood, Mr. Body. I'm going to let Mr. Sato have a few minutes on this, and we'll go from there. But
Judge, I'm sorry. I did answer this. I answered it for Ms. Merchant. I stated that I was speculating. The judge, someone objected to the speculation, but this was the exact same language.
All right, well, thank you for that, Mr. Bradley. Mr. Sato was asking.
I mean, this guy, you said it last week. Lawyers get themselves in trouble when they go on the stand. I mean, he was confused. He was bumbling.
No one wants a lawyer as a witness.
It was like